Jesus is talking to us today about loving Him above all things. And He uses kind of language that can be a little bit shocking. He says, whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. We know that Jesus is God, and so even though this is a little bit shocking, we can understand Him saying this, right? He ought to be loved above all things. Now, I imagine this was harder for the Jews to hear for the first time, because it's almost like, imagine you subscribe to a gym or something, and you have like a trainer that trains you there, or maybe like a coach in a team you're a part of, like a soccer team or something. And, you're kind of liking your coach and he's teaching you a lot. And then suddenly he's like, hey, if you really want me to be your coach and you really want to be my student, I need to be more important than your parents and your family. You'd be like, okay, I think I'm going to go join another team. Thank you. Right? But Jesus, right? And so he's demanding a lot, but it's because who He is, because He is God. And so He can demand such a thing, that we make Him the center of our lives, even above our parents, our children, our spouse. He has to be number one for things to be ordered in the correct order. So how do we know if we actually love Jesus above all things? How do we know if we do this or we don't? Well, one way in which we perhaps sometimes kind of think about love is kind of our feelings, right? You could say, hey, do I love this person? And you're like, yeah, I can tell that I do because of how I feel towards them. Maybe I experience a lot of affection towards my child, and thus I know that I love my child or my parents or whoever it may be, my spouse, my boyfriend, girlfriend, right? And so feelings, our emotions or affection is an important part of love. It is. And so that's something we could look at regarding the Lord. We have affection for Him. However, love as well is much more, right? That's simply an affection, a feeling within us. Because perhaps, you could have somebody that tells you, hey, I have a great affection for you. I have all these, emotions towards you. And then maybe you ask them, okay, thank you. That's awesome that you love me. And maybe you ask them to do something for you, maybe something small. And every single time you ask them, they're like, no, I'm not going to do that for you. No. Eventually, you're like, well, they have all these feelings for me, but did they really love me when, never without a good reason, they never do things for me, right, without a good reason, right? Love also has to do with actions, with that behavior towards the other. I can have great feelings towards somebody, but if I'm always, being mean towards them, my behaviors towards them, then my love is not as big, right? Actions are also part of love. So we want to know if Jesus is the center of our lives, we actually love Him above everything, we have to examine our life. Look at how we live. Look at our actions. Does my life, do my actions, if I look about how I live my life, really revolve around the Lord? Perhaps another way to asking this question is, does my life look different than, let's say, a non-Christian? And maybe you come to Mass, you're here, that's awesome, and you pray a little bit every day. But besides those things, does your life look different from a non-Christian? Somebody who does not follow the Lord, from a non-Catholic. It should look different. The way in which you behave towards others, the way in which you spend your money, how you spend your free time. If Jesus is the center of your life has to look different than somebody whose life does not revolve around the Lord. Perhaps a question to ask us regarding this sort of acting towards the Lord is, am I willing to do anything that the Lord asks me? I love Him. Am I willing to do anything that He asks me because He is above all? A couple weeks ago, about a month ago, I had the opportunity of going to Honduras. I went to do a mission trip to Honduras. Really beautiful experience. I've gone multiple times. This is my third time. And this time when I was there, I was visiting some families and some of the missionaries that are down there. And they started telling me about this one particular family that is a family from the U.S. who had been there for some time. They had just returned to the States. And they were just kind of telling me how moved they were by this family and how, they experienced the Lord through this family. Some people even said, through them, I kind of knew that it was possible to live a holy marriage, right? They were telling me all these things, and I was like, well, who is this family? So they started telling me more about this family. So the history of this family that I was really moved and challenged by. So this couple got married kind of right out of college or a few years after college. And after being married, and she was expecting her first child, they were expecting their first child, they were kind of wanting to make the Lord the center of their lives. And so they started asking this question to the Lord. Lord, how do you want us to follow you as a couple, right? We're willing to do anything you ask of us. We want to make you the center of our lives. And in their prayer, they started experiencing the Lord inviting them to go on mission to Honduras. And so very boldly, as they experience this in their prayer, they say yes to the Lord. And so they go, as she's expecting her first child, right? As a couple are expecting their first child, they go to Honduras to begin mission work as a couple as they expect their first child. And they don't know how long they're going to stay there. They're just kind of following the Lord's invitation. And so they're there. They have their first child. They stay there for a little bit longer. She gets pregnant again. They have their second child. And they stay there for a total of 5 years, right? As she's pregnant with her third child. And they sense the Lord is inviting them to come back to the States. And so after 5 years of mission, they're like, okay, Lord, I think it's time for us to go back to the States. And so they come back. And they're here for some time, and I think about 10 years. They have a couple other children, I think total of 7. And then again, as they're here for those 10 years, they're asking the Lord, we want you to be the center of our lives. How? What can we do for you? We'll do anything. So they're living their life here, kind of doing anything the Lord asks of them. And after 10 years of being here, they also sense the Lord inviting them once again to go back to Honduras with their 7 children. And they boldly say yes to the Lord, and they go back there for 2.5 years, almost 3 years. And then again, they sense the Lord asking them to come back, and they come back here. And now they're back here in the state, here in Texas. I think a lot about kind of a couple of things regarding this couple that really, really challenged me. The first is, I cannot understand my handwriting, so give me a second here. All right, let's see if I can decipher this. All right, so first thing, right, that I was moved by this couple is that they have this space, right, of asking the Lord, what do you want us to do? Do we have a space in our life of asking the Lord, what do you want us to do? And then second, do we say yes when He asks something difficult of us, right? I can think of this couple having plenty of excuses, right? Or not even excuses, like legitimate concerns. Lord, I'm pregnant with my first child. You want me to go to this third world country? What about safety of my children? Language? What about the education of my children? What about money? What am I going to do with finances? Yet, Lord, you're asking this of me, and I trust you. And I'm going to say yes. And kind of these two things. Do I have space for the Lord to invite me to follow Him more faithfully? That's the first thing. And second, would I say yes? I think it's very inspiring, this couple. I'm convicted and challenged by them. It makes me ask, Lord, am I giving you enough? How do you want me to follow you more wholeheartedly? And obviously, to follow Jesus and love Him does not mean you have to go on mission, right? I think this is a very particular call this couple got. I don't think most people are called to this. So if you're not going on mission, it's not mean you don't love the Lord or anything like that. But are we willing to do whatever the Lord asks us, right? You have space in your heart for Him to invite you to a greater following. And then when He does invite you, do you follow? What are some things He could ask of you? I don't know. You have to ask Him, but let me give you just some things, right? Maybe He can ask you to go on mission. He can, like this couple. Or maybe if you're not married yet, He could ask you, if you're a man, right, to leave everything behind and follow Him as a priest. Or if you're a woman, right, and you're not married yet, he could ask you to give him everything and belong to him, right? Be his bride, be a religious sister. If you're a married person, you have children, he could ask you maybe to work a little bit less, to spend more time with your children if you're not spending enough time with them. Or maybe if you're very financially stable, really you don't have great responsibilities with your children anymore, the Lord could ask you, hey, why don't you take a hit in your payment and go work for something that serves humanity more or the church more? Since really you don't need all this money anymore, right? Maybe you won't have as nice of a car, but you will be serving me more. Maybe he could invite you to have another child. Maybe he could ask you to give more money to the capital campaign. All right. And I'm sure he may. Right? He asked me the same, right? Maybe he is asking you to give up TikTok. Maybe such a distraction in your life. And he's like, just give it up. Just delete that app. It's not good for you. What may the Lord be asking of you? Is he the center of your life? Do we have space for him to ask things of us? And then do we say yes? One thing I want to invite you to do kind of for the rest of this Mass is, I've heard this kind of idea, I was invited to do this before, of writing a spiritual blank check to the Lord, right? Spiritual blank check to the Lord. So this is kind of like a spiritual exercise. Will you imagine yourself writing a check about your life, right? We're talking about money here, we're talking about your life, right? And you write it to the Lord, right? To my loving Father, to Jesus, right? And you sign it, but you leave the quantity blank. You say, Lord, you can put there whatever you want. And you can put that check on the altar, right? On this spiritual way as we do the offertory. When I was asked to do this by a priest, I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. No, thank you. Because it's hard. That's a hard exercise to do. So if you can do it, I would ask you that you do it during this Mass. Give him a blank check of your life. Let him put whatever he wants on the quantity. If you really can't find it in you to do it, because you're like, this is scary, ask the Lord to give you grace. Ask him, Lord, help me to trust you. You're not going to ask me anything that is not going to ultimately fulfill me, so help me to trust you. Whoever finds his life, as the Lord tells us today, will lose it. But whoever loses his life for the Lord's sake, he will find it.